Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. We are here for our next episode of our weekly recaps, and this one is for SmackDown, which took place on March 14th, 2025, in Barcelona, Spain. And we kick off the show with an LA Knight promo as your new US champion. Basically, it comes down into a very, very hot crowd, and I'm quickly reminded that most crowds are better than U.S. crowds. This one being in Barcelona and the European crowds in general, U.S. doesn't deserve these shows as often as they get, and they should be split more even, in my opinion, because they make even the slightest things feel mania worthy, and it makes the show more enjoyable. So I'm sure we'll see that trend here over the next couple of weeks of this European tour. I'm sure we'll see that mentioned quite often. But I just wanted to put that out there here at the beginning. But anyways, LA Knight really feeds into that crowd, and just says he's happy to be U.S. champion again, and mentions that this is the first time SmackDown's ever been in Spain, which is insane to think about. But anyways, we shortly get interrupted by Jimmy Uso, who runs in to say, "I'm running out of time to find a spot on the Mania card. How about I go ahead and challenge you for that US title?" But before Knight can respond, he gets interrupted. They get interrupted by Solo, Jacob, and Tama Tonga. And some back and forth goes on there before Braun Strowman comes in and his ongoing beef with Jacob Fatu comes in as well. And then they are interrupted by Nick Aldis, who does his very best Teddy Long impersonation and sets up a 6-man tag match on the spot. This was as good as a random 6-man tag match can be, and obviously it helps tie into the Mania build with Strowman and Jacob Fatu. I feel like that's probably where we're going. Does that tie in with the U.S. title? I'm not sure. Obviously, with LA Knight being the new U.S. champion, we certainly have a bunch more possibilities that we could do. Clean slate of challengers, so to speak. Will they just choose one, or will we get a slew of them? We'll have to wait and find out. But it feels like we're definitely setting up, as of now, Braun and Jacob Fatu. Then we have an odd segment, and I'm really curious to get your opinions on this, KP. And this is the Jade Cargill interview. Interviewed by Kathy Kelly in the stands before the fans arrive. This is just weird. I'm basically continuing off of my thoughts on this last week, and it feels like the heel-face dynamic is off. Because she's attacking Naomi, and Naomi has not done anything back yet, it feels like she's the heel here, even though I don't think she's supposed to be. And then we get the interruption with Raquel and Liv and Jade decide they're gonna have a match next week, and then Jade just gets up and walks off with the interview and says, "This isn't going down like this," or something of the sort. And that to me feels like a heel thing to do, just cut an interview short by walking off. Yeah, this one's strange to me. I don't know if they're still blurring that lines because Bianca is still going to be involved, and maybe Bianca is the heel in this. As we've mentioned in previous weeks, she's certainly showing off those heel vibes. So yeah, I'm curious to get your thoughts. I know there's not a ton of context or content to go off of here, but just the dynamic between this whole thing is strange. But anyways, the next match we have is Charlotte versus B-Fab. And speaking of strange, B-Fab kind of inserting herself here last week in a match for Charlotte. And then I think I also mentioned that she was in the later segment with Chelsea Green and her title match. She decided to get involved there as well. Obviously, we knew that B-Fab probably wasn't going to win this one. So I think, at least in my eyes, the intention of this match was probably just to get B-Fab, in the spotlight for a minute. And if she could even, hold her own versus someone like Charlotte, maybe that helps her going forward and helps her elevate into bigger and better things. And because obviously I feel like she has the charisma and I feel like she has something to work off of. Obviously, I think she still needs some work inside the ring. Um, but yeah, unfortunately, I feel like BFAB was fine here, but I don't feel like she showed anything that was overly, exciting or made me think, oh, she's ready. I didn't quite get that, and it was a pretty short match, all in all. But of course, Charlotte gets the win. She locks in the figure eight, doesn't let go of it until Tiffany Stratton comes in. And then we get yet another instance of the entire security guard team trying to break these two up. This continues for quite a while, similar to how we saw a few weeks ago with Seth and Punk. And Tiffany does not one but two jumps off the turnbuckle, and then a pretty tall height later on. It kind of gets thrown in with the Miz TV segment at the beginning of that. But a funny bit about this whole thing was they had like the entire team for these two, but then later when Drew's attacking Damian Priest, he got one security guard referee. So I thought that was kind of funny. But anyways, the pro here, I think, because I don't feel like the Charlotte BFAB match did much, was that Tiffany, I feel like, finally got an instance of being on top. I feel like she finally walked away with not looking like the lesser opponent. She feels like she actually stands a chance with both segments. The first one that we thought was ended, and then the second one where she comes out and does it again, where they're still going back and forth. So I think that's a big plus. I think she kind of showed like her attitude kind of got brought back from the little we did see of her. Felt like she was more confident and more herself and her character that we've seen up until this feud. So that's a big pro for me. And speaking of pros, what I will say is probably the best episode of Miz TV. And quite literally, the Miz talking down Cody Rhodes, talking trash to Cody Rhodes about how he should have accepted The Rock's offer. And he was already upset because the Tiffany Charlotte brawl messed up the flow of the show. And before he says anything else, I don't think Cody got anything in. He simply hit the Miz with Crossroads, and that was that. And then I think John mentioned that he would see John Cena on Monday. This is good because, as we've mentioned the past few weeks, I don't think Cody Rhodes can continue to hold this promo on his own. I don't think there's much here that he could have said that would have helped continue that. So again, letting him show that, my actions can do more than words at this point, and I completely agree with that. And now we just have to wait till Monday to get their face to face. So that'll be very interesting, and I like this direction for that. So with that, KP, I know I rambled a bit there. What were your thoughts on the matches and promos thus far? On what felt like a pretty slow first half, but I believe that is increased and better the second.
Well, there was a lot to go through during, I think, these first few segments here. I think let's start from the beginning. So we talk in the matchup, 6-man tag match at the beginning of the night. Not that the crowd needed an excuse to get loud, but I think this did a good job of making them settled in. LA Knight being the first one to come on out and obviously cut that promo and stuff and, get things started. The crowd went absolutely electric to begin with, and it just shows the European crowds are always top notch, aren't they? Wherever they go, wherever they are, it's always one to bring the energy and the noise. So yeah, they didn't let up here, that's for sure. I quite enjoyed the first match, not gonna lie. I thought the tag team matchup was what it was. It wasn't anything special, but it was a nice little way to get things started. The brawl, between Braun Strowman coming on out and obviously, going into the matchup, it just seemed to make sense. The animosity between himself and Jacob Fatu is something that continues to grow each week. And I like Nick Aldis coming out and getting a good reaction as well. But yeah, the match itself was pretty fine. And I think ultimately it probably was the correct decision, the way that they did it. And it allows Braun Strowman to sort of like build some momentum, get a bit of a nod going into that eventual big match with Jacob Fatu. It's going to happen at some point, I'm sure. I'm looking forward to it. Should be a great match. Obviously, they had the match at Saturday night's main event a while ago now, which seems like forever ago, really. But I feel like a whole lot's changed, but nothing really changed at all. If you get what I mean by that. But no, I'm looking forward to that one whenever it does take place. The second match of the night, yeah, perhaps maybe a little bit of an odd one. This one, B-Fab with Charlotte Flair. I think B-Fab is one of those women who I never really had like high sort of like tabs on, and then it got to a point where she sort of like showed up for the first time in a while. I think it was like towards the back end of last year, and she looked a lot better than she was I think the previous time I'd seen her. I think she does continue to get better and better every time I see her in the ring. But obviously against someone like Charlotte Flair, who's literally building into a WrestleMania match against Tiffany Stratton, it's huge, right? It's pretty big. So yeah, I think when it comes to building towards that WrestleMania matchup, you know, taking on Charlotte is a fool's errand at this point. It's only ever going to be a Charlotte Flair win. So yeah, I was happy to see Tiffany Stratton standing tall at the end of all of this, which seemed to go on quite some time after the match. Obviously, we had the first brawl going into the Miz TV segment. But yeah, we've spoken a lot recently about how Charlotte Flair has stood tall over Tiffany Stratton every single time since declaring that match, and even during the declaration of said match, she was standing over her at that point. So yeah, for now, Tiffany to get the ball rolling, to get some momentum. I feel like that's going to be really important for her, and it's going to be interesting to see how they play this through the next few weeks, because it has been so heavily sided towards Charlotte Flair. Are they now just going to literally just turn the momentum upside down and have Tiffany Stratton do the exact same? I don't know. Maybe they have a bit of back and forth. Who knows? But yeah, it's a step in the right direction for this one for sure. Like you said, the amount of security and officials they had trying to separate these two women, it was quite the backstage team, wasn't it? It was a lot of people. So yeah, it just shows the the mutual hatred towards each other from these two. You mentioned about the Jade Cargill segment with Liv Morgan. I get it. It is a little bit of a strange one to think about. I think the way I'm thinking of it is Jade obviously comes out and attacks Naomi inside the chamber, then attacks her again the week afterwards. I feel like with Liv Morgan, it's a case of she has had her name basically dragged through the mud. I think so they've been basically her and Raquel. I'm saying now, they've been the names that have sort of like been associated with this when it was nothing to do with them. And I think Liv Morgan obviously ultimately thinks that, well, you did nothing to try and clear my name. I demand an apology, that sort of thing. And I don't think Jade really cared too much about Liv. So from my perspective, I think yeah, Jade is sort of acting in like an assertive way, maybe showing some traits of that a heel does. But I think from her perspective as well, she doesn't really care who she upsets at this point, because she just wants to get back at Naomi. Obviously, Naomi took a few months away of her career. The tag team titles, I guess you could say as well, because they lost them by the time she got back. So yeah, I think when it comes to the heel aspect, I think maybe it's more just Jade. She has to act in a certain way. Like whether you're a face or a heel, you have to sort of come back and you have to be assertive. You have to be dominant. You have to be angry. And you want revenge, right? And I think that's basically what this comes down to. So she's not really in the mood to take anything from anyone, even Liv Morgan, who does deserve an apology, I guess you could say, in a retrospective way. But yeah, I think that's just the way I'm looking at it. Maybe that helps, maybe it doesn't, maybe I'm rambling. But yeah, I think ultimately that's fine by me. But yeah, I don't know. That's just my take. And then that Miz TV segment, yeah, like you said, it was quite an interesting one, right? Miz didn't really get a lot going. Cody just hit the crossroads, and then yeah, we'd build up towards John Cena. I think, like you said, that confrontation is going to be very interesting between himself and Cena, because we haven't seen the two, face up since obviously the events at Elimination Chamber. So we're all wanting to know what the next little step this story is going to take. Obviously, with John Cena's heel turn being such a massive moment, for us not to have seen him since, and then the first time we see him is going to be a face-to-face with Cody Rhodes in Brussels. I'm excited. I really, really am. So yeah, they're building up quite nicely so far, but it'll be great to see the two sort of bouncing off of each other on Monday Night Raw and sort of like building up even further. But yeah, I think when it comes to these 4 segments, not a bad way to start the show. But yeah, I think definitely looking forward to talking about the second half for sure.
Yeah, the Monday Night Raw in Belgium should be really interesting. I typically wouldn't be a fan of them holding off that long after a heel turn, but I feel like we've waited 22 years for the heel turn. I feel like a few weeks and no big deal. Obviously, I don't think it's lost much momentum considering the person who is the one that turned heel. So yeah, Monday will be fun for sure. And in terms of Jade, I get the Liv Morgan dynamic. I agree. She has a reason to be involved still because her name was dragged through the mud, and rightfully so. I feel like in terms of her character, as is just the dynamic between Jade and Naomi and kind of Bianca too is just a little different, and I feel like Jade, even rightfully so, her being angry for being on the shelf for as long as she was, storyline and whatnot. Um, but Naomi kind of just not doing anything heel towards her back. Like she could have attacked Jade during that interview. I think that would have made more sense in terms of the story they've been telling so far. Excuse me. But yeah, it's just a little different. But I like Jade's character and being the super confident, even if she does blur the lines a little bit in terms of what she's telling as a face, and the dynamic that they have between the three of them. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. I would be surprised if during that Liv Jade match we don't get some sort of interference by Naomi, especially if she's going to be the full-on heel here. I feel like something else needs to happen between them three at some point because we don't have that. Really, we only have like a month left to build this up. So yeah, curious to see how that story progresses. But we waited quite a few months for it, so we'll see where they go from here. But yeah, anyways, moving on throughout the night, the next segment we have is Damian Priest versus Shinsuke, and what felt like a bit of a random match, but they did show a segment that took place earlier in the day, where they decided to make this match official. You probably know where I'm going with this before I even go here, but Damon ends up winning by DQ because Drew ended up being a ringside, trying to taunt Damien. Didn't really work. Damien still stood tall and probably would have won the match had Drew not come in and interfered. I don't have a ton to say about this. Maybe I'm still a little bit salty from Shinsuke losing last week to LA Knight. The reign wasn't great, but we all know that. We went over that last week. So yeah, they made Shinsuke look even weaker, and they did so to simply remind us of this Drew Damian Priest feud that I don't think either of us really care about. So swiftly moving on. Yeah, Carmelo Hayes versus Randy Orton. This one they've kind of been building up to for a while, and kind of a callback to their first match together as well. And this was, in my opinion, this was the first really entertaining match of the night. Obviously, Carmelo's future is bright as hell, and Randy Orton is a veteran, been here for quite some time. So these two worked really well off of one another, I felt like. I feel like Carmelo got a decent amount of offense in, and then of course Orton gets the RKO. Carmelo's not gonna kick out of that. And then we see Carmelo's almost getting punted, and then we have Kevin Owens show up and pull him out of the ring, and then we see Randy chase him out. But yeah, this was a really, really good match. First one of the night, in my opinion. And yeah, just did a good job of continuing the storyline between Randy and KO in terms of showing them that the animosity is still there, as it likely will be up until Mania. And then we move on and have Gunther, who announces that he's going to attack essentially a local talent and a Spain native, I think is the words he used. But this ends up being Axiom from Fraxium team on NXT. And this was a surprise to me, at least. I don't know if anyone else knew about this or if the crowd knew about it beforehand. But obviously he got a big pop being introduced as I think the first Spain wrestler. I might be wrong on that, but regardless, this was another good match building off the last one, and this was just another good example of two kind of opposites working really well together. Obviously, considering the two, Gunther and Axiom, both very skilled at what they do, and yeah, I feel like their dynamic worked really well here. And of course, Gunther does get the win, but it was not easy. Axiom put up a fight here, and the crowd was really into this one. And yeah, I don't think Axiom comes away looking Actually, I would argue Axiom comes away looking a lot better, even though he did get the loss here. Gunther did not have an easy time doing it. So this one was a ton of fun. And then we build up to the main event, the Street Profits versus DIY. This whole build-up has been extremely messy, but a ton of fun. And this was yet again another good match. So as I mentioned earlier, the first half of the show felt like it was a bit slow, didn't really bring much to the table, and then this second half really kicked things up into high gear. So again, another good match, but considering the teams involved, Street Profits and DIY, I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. What does end up being a surprise here is that we have yet another title change. Off the top of my head, I want to say this is the fifth title change in, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks, which is truly incredible, especially considering we're just over a month out from WrestleMania. And so I did some thinking on this, and while I don't think this result takes away from the match, I find myself wondering if the Mania title matches will be affected by all of these new champions. Because obviously, if one of these new champions were to lose at Mania, their reign would be under 2 months. And so obviously I don't think that's a direction we should go. But I know I've also mentioned that I like the reigns that aren't a year plus long for everyone, because then it feels like these matches don't mean anything. So yet again, we have another title change, and I can't recall exactly how long the DIY reign was, but I know it wasn't that long. So at the end of the day, I feel like this helps us look forward to these weekly matches. And I know we've talked about that before, and I'm just curious to see, and we can talk about this after Mania, if all of these title changes ended up affecting the feel, or if we see just a bunch of title changes, reigns continued, and we don't see any new title holders after Mania, if that was kind of falling into place with this one. But what I think is more likely is simply Triple H is just now letting these guys kind of change titles a little more, which I'm all for, just within reason. I don't want to see super quick reigns, but I also don't want to see super long. So somewhere in the middle. So hopefully this is just heading in that direction, and that's what we can go from here. But yeah, it was a great surprise to see the Street Profits win. Obviously, much deserved. I think the announcing team said it's been 4+ years since they've held a title, which is crazy to think. Had you asked me how long it was, I probably would have said a couple of years at most. So if that is the case, then that didn't feel like it at all. I love the Street Profits, and I think they're both very talented. So I'm all for this, and curious to see now, with Pretty Deadly being #1 contenders, how we build into that Mania. Do the rest of these teams still get a shot as well? I would hope so, and I would imagine once that #1 contender spot by Pretty Deadly gets their title match, I'm assuming before Mania, then we get the other tag teams involved, interference, and that's how we get the big match that I think most of us want for Mania. So with that, KP, how did you enjoy the second half of SmackDown? Some pretty incredible matches, in my opinion, but what were your thoughts and takeaways here?
Yeah, it was a pretty good second half of the show. I think when it comes to the matches themselves, you've got a lot to go through here. So let me go from the beginning. Damian Priest and Shinsuke Nakamura. Yeah, I mean, I think the main take from this one is basically just Drew McIntyre, getting a little bit of one-upmanship on Damian Priest. I think Drew is in such an awkward position here because he has been foiled by Damian Priest on a number of times. They did a bit of a segue to how many times it really has been in the last sort of like year and whatsoever. Damian Priest always seeming to come out on top when Drew McIntyre has has been screwed or something. So I think when it comes to this particular matchup here, I'm glad they did the post-match sequences as they did, because Damian Priest seemingly feels the kind of guy who never really looks bad. Like, he always seems to come out on top during segments, and he always seems to get the wins. always seems to be looking very, very strong and like, just ultimately on top of his game all the time. So this is the first time in a long time that I actually can remember where Damian Priest has been left at the end of a segment where he's been laid out, and that tells you something about how high, creative are on Damian Priest at the moment. So for them to finally have pulled the trigger and allow Drew McIntyre to actually stand tall above Damian, I think is a step in the right direction. Ultimately, this weighs down to the match at WrestleMania that ultimately these two are going to have. Not particularly keen on it, but as long as Drew comes out looking strong and could get the win in that one, actually, I wouldn't be too against it. But Drew McIntyre in the last 18 months or whatever, I don't trust that at all. But yeah, we'll see. Shinsuke Nakamura, his reign, and it wasn't the greatest of reigns, so I don't know what's really next for him. Does he feasibly have a chance to go back into the US title picture? I'm not too sure. I don't think so right now. There seems to be a lot going on in that sort of situation, but I suppose perhaps you never know what's going to happen the next few weeks. But yeah, the no contest thing, never normally a fan of it ending like this, but I suppose if Drew's going to be looking as strong as he is at the end of the segment, I'm not really going to have too much to complain about regarding that. The match between Randy Orton and Carmelo Hayes, I thought was a pretty good contest. Carmelo Hayes is a pretty solid performer. Was Randy Orton one of the greatest of all time? Putting these two in, one pretty much at the end of their career, one near enough at the start of their career when it comes to the main roster. I feel like Carmelo, whenever he steps in, always seems to put on a good contest. Always seems to do well against anybody he goes in with. He hasn't really won many big matches on SmackDown. I think you would agree that this is a big match. Whenever against Randy Orton, that seems to be the case. But I liked the fact that the attention was only on these two. There was no Kevin Owens during the match. He did obviously show up at the end, which I found to be a little bit of an odd moment. But I like the fact they just had these two go at it, just the two of them, and not have to worry about anything else going on. Because you could have pulled the trigger and been having Kevin Owens come out and cost Randy Orton here, and just basically just stick one up to him, leading into WrestleMania. But they left it until afterwards, and I'm okay with that because it gives Randy Orton some momentum. We haven't really seen him, competing that often recently. Obviously, that long spell out with injury due to the power driver. So, yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was a smart way of doing things here. And Carmelo Hayes, he didn't look particularly weak. Losing against Randy Orton, that's not going to do anything for you, is it? It's not going to make you look bad. Then that Gunter and Axiom match I thought was brilliant. They even mentioned a little bit of A-Kid at the very start of the segment, which was kind of cool. And these two really had a great contest. I think Gunter, when he's got these kind of matches, it just seems to be improving his sort of stature as the world champion. I think in recent times, he's been sort of hurt by the creative direction of what they've been doing with him as champion. And I think just interest has sort of fizzled out from him as a world champion. With his Intercontinental Championship that he had, I feel like they booked him so well and they did a great job of that throughout the majority of it. And now they just seemingly don't know how to really go about it. But he's best in these positions when he's put in a ring against somebody who, you wouldn't see him go up against every single week. And he's having a really good back and forth match with them. And he turns things around, just absolutely brutalizes them towards the end, just hits ultimately move after move after move in order to get the victory. That's when he's at his best, when he's really being pushed in the ring. Because he is the ring general. That's essentially his gimmick here. And we haven't seen much of the ring general in a long period of time. So for him to not even be able to do his own gimmick in his world championship reign, I feel like has been absolutely, I don't know what the word I'm looking for here, the word I'm looking for here is, but it's just it doesn't make any sense to me. But given these, even against Akira Tozawa and Otis, he's been bringing out really good matches out of those two as well. Now against Axiom, it isn't going to stop here. If you give him matches against anybody, he's going to do this as long as they're given the time to make a good match, and then you're actually invested in the title reign again. But if you just have him coming out and just putting Jay to sleep every week, it just doesn't really seem as important as it could be. But this is a lot better, and I'm happy with this. But it's a great match. Axiom had a great reception, obviously being Spanish. The crowd really getting behind him. And they were gutted at the end then, weren't they? It was almost silence when Gunter won. And that's the reaction you want from a home crowd. But obviously, you're not going to expect Axiom to beat Gunter, are you? But yeah, great match. Really enjoyed it. Then the main event. I mean, I got a lot of good stuff to say about this. I think when it comes to the tag team titles, we always speak highly of them on SmackDown. The division being such polar opposite to that on Raw. I don't want to sound too much like a broken record, so I'm not going to go too much into that right now. But regarding Street Profits and their 4-year wait since having a tag titles last, it's way, way, way too long. It's far too long. These guys are unbelievable when they're given the chance to go. And this sort of like new vindictive side of them that we've been seeing in the last few weeks, I think it could make for a really fun tag team championship reign. Obviously, going into WrestleMania, you've got 5 tag teams on SmackDown who are all sort of in the mix to, be competing in said match. As to how the match is going to look, I would love to see all of them in. We've spoken about this before a couple of times. But now we've got new champions, to sort of like build in towards it. And we're pretty deadly on the horizon for these two. That is their next goal. So it's sort of like it never stops, really, does it? There's always something else for the tag team division on SmackDown. So we've now got to basically wait until whatever happens next between them and Pretty Deadly, and then we can get a clear goal as to going into WrestleMania about how this is going to work out. And I'm really interested to see how this is going to play out. But the match itself was great. DIY, their second reign was a lot better than their first. Obviously, not lasting, I think, longer than, what was it, 1 or 2 weeks? It wasn't very long, was it, before they lost to the Bloodline? But this one, they made it a lot better, and they were given a chance, to sort of like develop some new things into their characters. They had that like minute silence, whatever stuff they were doing. It's only a little thing, but I thought it was quite a cool thing to do. And then I just felt like they've been helping build up every tag team around them, and I'm sure the Street Profits are just going to receive the baton and run with it and do exactly what DIY have done, and possibly what even Motor City Machine Guns were doing, and like things like that. I feel like every team is sort of like building each other up and making each other stronger in and around these titles, these tag titles. So yeah, the division's brilliant. They're doing such a good job with it, and the match itself was a very fun way. Didn't expect Street Profits to get the win, but I'm quite happy they did, because it's been too long. 4 years, far, far, far too long for a team like this. Before going into just talking about SmackDown as an overall here, there were a couple of little vignettes throughout the night. There was one which sort of like almost like a cloud of smoke that was sort of like rising up on the screen. Quite dark premise to it. There was a number 4 that was in the middle of the screen. As to what the 4 represents, maybe it could be 4 weeks, which would be the week before WrestleMania. Not entirely sure if that's what they're referring to, but that could be something. We've seen smoke in the past from several individuals. One notably could be Aleister Black, who could be WWE bound again. That's obviously very up in the air. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. It's just sort of a guess and assumption for the time being, but it's a possibility. So perhaps they could be referring to an Aleister Black appearance soon, coming back to the company. I'd love to see him back if so, but obviously that's very hearsay for now. Then going into another segment that we had later on in the night, which would be for be this sort of like a much brighter promo. You're talking like fire. There's a particular individual that's in a ring. You see like some close-ups of like certain parts of his body, and then you go at the very end. You see an ending shot of him sat on the top turnbuckle on the ropes. I mean, it could be something to do with Rey Fenix, the brother of Penta, over on Monday Night Raw. Apparently he'd been let go of his other company recently, so perhaps maybe we could see him coming over into WWE and then possibly appearing on SmackDown, being separate from Penta. So that could be quite interesting if we do see that. Obviously, that's very much up in the air. Maybe it is, maybe it's not situation right now. But it seems to me, when I was watching that, I got that vibe. This could be for Rey Fenix, and that would be awesome to see. To see him coming into SmackDown. If he was to make an impression the same way Penta has on Raw, I'm sure are going to be in for an absolute treat. But SmackDown itself was a very good show. I thought, they had a lot of good moments on it. The tag title changing hands, a couple of solid matches. You're talking like Gunther and Axiom, Randy Orton and Carmelo Hayes. And yeah, the 6-man to begin the show as well. Obviously some segments like, building towards WrestleMania, a lot of good things happening here. I would say that, yeah, SmackDown are doing things a lot better than they were recently. It's a step in the right direction. It's a good time to get into the stride going into WrestleMania. So just keep it up, keep it moving. I'm sure we're going to have a good build. For this show, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. Like I said, I think there are a few things that still need to be worked on, but we're going in the right direction. I think, things are looking up for sure. But that tag team victory at the end was quite a shocking moment, and I really, really enjoyed that. So yeah, great episode. Enjoyed it, a lot of fun, and looking forward to seeing how they build it into WrestleMania.
Yeah, some really good points, and I think one in particular being the Carmelo and Randy Orton match and KO not coming until the end. Because when I first saw that match, I thought 100% chance KO is going to come into this match and ruin it. But I feel like because they went a different route, it was refreshing to see, and both allowed Carmelo to kind of showcase his skill set against someone like Randy Orton. Not that he hasn't had an opportunity to do that, but in terms of just getting a full fledged match, a lot of his wins, even that he has picked up, which haven't been that many, have been cheap wins or roll ups and that sort of thing. So, and same can be said with the Gunther and Axiom match. They could have easily had Jay interfere. Granted, he's a face, so it wouldn't make as much sense. But they were taken away from that match and what they were able to do. But yeah, I think Street Profits in their kind of different persona here will be great to see. I think they'll make great, very confident champions. So curious to see where they take that. And I feel like we do talk shit on Raw a lot in the tag division, but I do feel like slowly and surely they are trying to build that up. You know, with the New Day being built up as heels as well. I feel like give it a couple more months, and they'll be on the right path at the very least. So but yeah, overall, yeah, first half of the show I felt like was a bit of a snooze. I didn't really do much in terms of building, but the second half felt like it did. But overall, everything had a purpose, you know, in our build to Mania. So I felt like at the end of the day, we're moving towards our end goal. Some of them faster than others, obviously. But yeah, first half wouldn't have got a very good rating for me, but overall, I too actually gave it an 8 out of 10. So on the same page there. Yeah, and then over the weekend too, we got an announcement for Backlash. Typically tends to be carryover feuds for Mania, and that was announced for May 10th. So literally 3 weeks after Mania. So a quick turnaround there. So it appears the action will not be stopping anytime soon. And with the European tour going on, I believe next week, Monday is obviously in Belgium, and then I think Friday is in Italy. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the crowds for this build up to Mania. I think that was purposely done by WWE. And as I mentioned earlier, it makes everything feel important and a little more fun when you have a crowd that's invested as they are. So looking forward to that. So with that, we will be back on Tuesday for our Raw recap, and we'll, I'm sure, discuss in great detail John Cena's return and what Cody Rhodes has to say about the actions that took place at Elimination Chamber. So if you agree with what we've said here or have some points to make that we missed, please let us know in the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you next time for another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. Take care.